Hello and welcome to Naturally Adventurous. I'm Charlie Hesse and I'm joined by my good friend Ken Behrens. Today we have our fourth podcast and Ken will be giving us some of his best birding experiences of his life. We're going to start just reminding you of our virtual tours that we've been doing. So if you haven't checked those out yet, please check them out at tropicalbirding.com/virtual-tours. Or you can just Google virtual tours and we will come up. We also wanted to tell you about an upcoming series that we've started to make, which is some online tutorials about birding skills. And we're calling this the Online School of Birding. And we're going to be teaching you all sorts of useful birding skills. So that's coming soon. You'll hear more about that in a later podcast.
It'll be travel stuff, photography, and birding. Some things that'll apply to anybody, some that just apply to traveling birders, some just to photographers.
Great. So we're going to kick off with some corrections from last week, I believe, Ken.
Yeah, well, one correction. I definitely misspoke when I was talking about the Horned Guan site. I called it Las Tuxtlas, but that's completely wrong. The site is called El Triunfo. I don't know how that slipped my mind, but just wanted to correct that. Yeah, that's the site in Chiapas for Horned Guan in southern Mexico. Is El Triunfo.
Las Tuxtlas is another killer hike in Mexico. That's probably another podcast in Veracruz. But
I look forward to it. And we heard from somebody who had been to Triunfo many times, right? Do you want to tell this story?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've got a regular client, a wonderful lady, full of life and full of stories, and she's really enjoying our podcast. She's one of our top fans, I would say. But yeah, she said she'd actually been to El Triunfo 4 times. She finally saw the Horned Guans on her 3rd visit there, but it's just a brief view of a bird flying away. So she went up a 4th time, and she was so exhausted, I believe, by the end of it, she had to sort of be dragged down the mountain on a sort of rice sack or something like that.
I think she said it was like a stretcher. It was like poles with rice sacks between, a kind of impromptu stretcher, probably almost as uncomfortable as a mule with a pack saddle.
It didn't sound much better. No. But anyway, thanks for that wonderful story. If you do have any stories about the places we visit or the birds that we look for, then do feel free to contact us and tell us about your stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciated about that story that she had been up there. She didn't see it until her 4th visit. And then she actually went back a 5th time and got really good views. And she said she saw like 32, which is crazy. But I guess at that point she'd earned her Horned Guans.
Definitely.
I heard from a couple other folks with stories related to ours. One was someone who was in New Guinea. And they bought essentially a Papuan Warhammer, which was made from cassowary claws. There's like one big and one small cassowary claws on this warhammer, and it's an incredibly deadly-looking, threatening weapon. It brought it home just how dangerous a sort of, and how well-equipped a bird the cassowary actually is.
And our friend that bought this thing, he looked equally deadly and threatening in the photograph.
Absolutely.
He was posing with his claw hammer.
I've been having nightmares about that photo ever since.
we may make some of these photos available for people to see.
Yep. I heard another good story about a cassowary. It was someone who was in Australia in the 90s, and they were basically trying to run a big business meeting, and they were sort of traveling around Australia with 300 business people. And meanwhile, they were desperately trying to bird the whole time, and they sort of had binoculars attached, and all these like high-powered business people are looking at them like they're strange, which is something I certainly identified with. And then they had a few days to do some birding, and they basically were sitting in someone's garden in the evening, and a cassowary just came strolling in. It must have been just an incredibly shocking thing, like almost like a dinosaur walking in on your dinner.
Just in the right place at the right time.
Indeed.
Okay, so we're going to move on to today's main feature. As those that have been listening know, we've been going through our top 10 bird sightings of our life. A lot of them are really crazy travel stories. Last time I did my 5th and 4th place bird sightings, and today Ken's going to kick off with his 5th place lifetime bird sighting, which I believe was Malaysian Rail-babbler.
Indeed. And is it correct that you have not yet seen this bird?
That is correct.
How does that make you feel?
Yeah. I think you know full well how it makes me feel. The interesting thing is, some of the places because you've seen it a few times now, eh?
Yeah. Yep.
You've now mentioned several places where you'd seen it, and I subsequently went to each of these places and tried my damnedest to see this bird in those places in the same way that you'd seen it. And failed miserably to even hear a peep out of this bird. I know full well how difficult it is to see, and I don't know if I've said this already, but it probably is my most wanted bird in the world at this time.
Yeah,
I had even planned trips. I had planned trips to see it in around March, April. And then COVID got in the way, and I had to beat a hasty retreat to my home, so I didn't get trapped somewhere. So it's really quite a. I won't say it's painful. It's gonna be great because I love hearing about this bird, and I'm close enough.
Yeah, you'll get it before long, and it'll be all the more satisfying.
Yeah, it will. So I'm looking forward to this very much, Ken.
So my first Rail-babbler, it's a bit of a story, of course. Although my story is sort of the opposite of yours. It was the first full day of birding I ever did in the range of Rail-babbler. I saw Rail-babbler. So I basically was on transit through Thailand, and I kept hearing about Peninsular Malaysia, especially our friend Sam Woods really loves Peninsular Malaysia, going on about Fraser's Hill. And so I decided, I'll spend a few days birding down there. Everything's new for me. It's got some of the best birds in the world. We talked about that with connection to helmeted hornbill, I think. It's just crazy good birds down there. And so, I made, I was doing this very cheap style of travel, backpacking around, and went to what's called Taman Negara National Park in peninsular Malaysia. And what I always enjoy about that is that it means national park. Taman Negara means national park in Bahasa Malaysian. So it's a bit of a silly name. But it's a wonderful place. It's just this huge tract of lowland rainforest, really well preserved. And it's that Sundaland forest is the tallest tropical forest in the world. It's just this towering, massive forest. Like the trees are like the pillars of a temple or something when you get into a really good patch of forest. It's just magnificent forest, even more so than the Amazon, which is obviously magnificent as well. But it's...
And I think they say it's one of the oldest rainforests in the world, don't they?
Right. I guess based on climate and stuff, like the Amazon is even more recently developed than that Sundaland rainforest, and it's super high diversity, of course, as those kind of places.
I think it has the highest tree diversity in the world, maybe?
Yep, I think that's right. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, I was, it takes a couple days to get there, and I was very excited to go birding there. You're just looking through the field guide, and your mouth is watering looking at these amazing birds. And, of course, one of the top targets for me was Rail-babbler. It's a monotypic family, so that it's one bird that makes up its own family. And how many bird families are there now? Like 250?
Yeah, it's up towards that.
So, this bird, it's all by itself is a whole family of birds. That's a big deal, and it's just a very weird and distinctive bird. It's really unlike anything else. It's sort of like a rail.
I was just looking at its place in the taxonomic list, and it's just sandwiched between two completely random other families that bear no resemblance. I think people really don't know exactly what it's.
Yeah, I think it's still a taxonomic mystery. I mean, people have speculated it's related to the Picathartes of Africa and the rock jumpers.
That's what it's next to at the moment. Yeah,
it's kind of like an ant thrush in some ways. It's kind of like the Malagasy Crossley's Vanga as well. So I don't know, but it's weird and it's different. And yeah,
we maybe want to give it a little quick description of this bird, just for those who've
I will
heard
do.
of it before.
It's got a fairly long tail and a long neck and long legs. It's kind of rufous brown, and then the face has this beautiful pattern. It has an orange stripe, a white stripe, and a black stripe. And I think the coolest thing about the bird is that it has these like blue-purple sacs on the side of the throat, and when it calls, it inflates these sacs. And I've actually been lucky enough to photograph a singing bird showing these, and I'll put that on my website, which you can check out after this episode. When it walks on the forest floor, it's kind of bobbing its head up and down in this. It looks very determined to get where it's going. It's one of these birds that very rarely flies. It just walks around on the forest floor. And so when you see it, you call it in, and it usually just circles around you. It just walks around you. It almost never flies. Medium sized, like bigger than a robin. Chunky little thing. So this was a high priority for me to see this bird on my first visit to its range. Probably my most wanted bird there. And I knew it was very tough. So my first day in Tamanagara, I had some good information from our friend Sam. And he basically told me, okay, you take this little ferry boat down river, and then you get off here. And so I basically got dropped off by a boat in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness, and I spent the entire day birding there, and it was just one of the best birding days of my life. I probably saw 50.
There's just no one else in there, right? It's just
absolutely. Well, that's actually part of
the forest.
That's part of the story, but I didn't see another tourist the entire day. It's just me in the forest, and I probably saw 50 new birds that day. It was just like a feeding frenzy of new birds, and I spent the entire day just birding like a fanatic. I mean, I didn't feel hunger, I didn't feel thirst, I just birded like mad. It was fantastic. And it's hard work, birding that Cinderland forest. It's like not many birds come easy. You're just craning your neck and you're looking at these incredibly tall trees. You hear barbets up in the canopy and you just can't even make them out. They're sort of up in the haze, almost up in the clouds. You've got all these like babblers in the understory, and they're all quite shy. At this point, I didn't know the vocalizations. I hadn't really studied that much, and but in some ways that actually made it more enjoyable. I was just bumping into all these cool birds. There's a whole bunch of great woodpeckers in Cinderland. I think I probably saw 6 or 7 new woodpeckers that day.
Wow.
So prior to seeing the Rail-babbler, I was just in the middle of this frenzied birding day, and I was walking along the trail, this narrow forest trail, and I would suddenly ask myself, when did I walk through water? I couldn't remember having been through a stream crossing or having slipped into a river or anything, but my boot was just sloshing, slosh, slosh. Couldn't figure out what is going on here. And so I figured, I guess
where this is going.
You've heard these stories before. So I took off my boot to just, wring out the water that somehow got into my boot. I figured maybe it's just sweat. It's a very hot, sweaty place. Well, took off my boot and come to find I was sloshing in a pool of my own blood. And my foot was being attacked by leeches who were just rasping away at my leg.
Oh, I think you've killed any possibility of any of our listeners wanting to go and check out Tamanagara now.
Well, here's what I'll say. I wasn't real well prepared for the jungle, which...
Did you have your trousers tucked into your socks even, or not?
No. I'd heard vague things about leeches and about how terrible they were, and, I knew that people usually wore these things called leech socks, which sort of go up to your knees, and it makes it hard for the leeches to get into your boots. But I guess that day I learned why people wear leech socks. I'll never forget that lesson. So those bites that I got on my legs, they itched for something like 6 months after that.
Ooh.
I mean, they just
they're itchy for a long time, eh?
Oof.
Yeah.
So
that's the worst part of them, I find. I don't mind the blood, it's just the itchiness afterwards.
Yeah, they really get me. So I paid the price for the Rail-babbler. It was well worth it, though. So basically, I was desperate to see Rail-babbler. I was just birding like mad all day. I hadn't heard one. I'd studied the vocalizations a little bit. And there's actually another bird, the garnet pitta, that sounds almost the same as rail-babbler. And so I was listening for these birds. Ooh. And it was interesting because I'd birded the full morning, hadn't had a peep out of either of these birds. And then it was sort of 2 p.m., the heat of the day, very, very hot. And all of a sudden I just heard one of them. And I chased it down, and it turned out to be a garnet pitta. And I hadn't realized this, but garnet pittas usually sing from the sort of sub-canopy. So it was one of these bird sightings where I was like desperately thrashing around the forest floor looking for this pitta hopping along, and I couldn't find it, and it seemed to be coming from everywhere. And then finally I looked up, and it was just like right over my head, just sitting there, really? Singing away. And within 15 minutes of having seen the garnet pitta, I heard another vocalization that was very similar but slightly different, and I said, that's got to be rail-babbler. And, I just dove off the path, off trail, bushwhacking, going for this thing. And it only took me a few minutes to see. It's one of these things where you hear it, and then you have to get close and then go really, really slow and just kind of look around each corner and, sort of crawl behind a log and look over your next little vista. And, had a fabulous view of this bird. It was just awesome. And these blue sacs inflated on the side of its throat, giving this kind of
they're just incredibly whistle. Secretive birds. I mean, they're just so good at eluding being seen.
Incredibly.
And they're really one of these birds that separates the men from the boys. You really need to use every little ounce of birding skill that you've got to see.
Yep, it was one of those sightings where I felt like I was using every little bit of field craft and stealth. And so when you actually see a bird under those circumstances, it's just so satisfying. You feel like, as you say, you've been stretched to your limits, like you've used everything you had to get this bird.
But I think there's a real sort of, kind of hunting instinct there, sort of tracking one of these birds and just creeping after it like that. And all it is at the end is you looking at it or taking a photo rather than... But I think it's the same instinct of hunting.
I agree. I think it's a deep instinct in at least a lot of people. And I just get into this kind of flow state where I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm not analyzing anything. I'm just absolutely focused on seeing this creature. And there's just this intense feeling of just being alive and being happy that comes from that state. I'm sure you experience something similar, and all birders do.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and knowing how difficult it is to see, and then not knowing whether you're going to see it or not, you've just got that sort of anticipation and sort of nervous energy sort of built up, and it's really, for me, it's one of the most exciting feelings that you get. I mean, people, adrenaline junkies jump out of planes and off mountains or whatever, but this for me is the ultimate sort of adrenaline rush, almost chasing one of these really elusive birds.
I agree, because there's something very unnatural about it, in that you've kind of made up this mission for yourself, but then there's also something very natural about it. Just being in the forest and just stalking an animal feels like this kind of primal thing to do.
It's a wonderful feeling. It's very difficult to describe, though, isn't it?
It's very different than like walking on a nature trail where there's like interpretive signs for you. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's a great way to get people engaged with nature and to get kids involved. But this is like a next level engagement with nature. Yeah, very exciting.
So I was, I think it might have been maybe a couple of years ago. I was going to, I've been a few times there, but I was asking you about rail-babbler and some other birds, and then you told me about this one spot where you'd seen it, and rather than getting dropped off on a boat, you can actually walk there. There's a very rough trail that goes from the sort of headquarters, and it was actually overgrown. People don't travel on that trail anymore, so we were sort of bushwhacking to get to, and it's a few kilometers down, and I was dragging my wife and my, probably at the time, 5-year-old son through the jungle. Yeah,
I did that whole trail once, and even just for me on my own, it was brutal.
And I felt so bad. We were just sweating, and there's just mosquitoes everywhere, and leeches, and we had all these tangles and vines and spines. And And I turned round, ready to apologize to both of them. And they just looked at me and said, "This is amazing."
Awesome.
And I was like, "Oh, good. I married the right woman."
Absolutely.
And fathered the right child. But we had a great time. We didn't see the... and I went back a second day to really try again for this bird. And I didn't get anywhere. And I just want to tell one more. And I asked you about another site, because there was a place up sort of in the mountains where you go looking for this pheasant and partridge. The Bukit Tinggi.
Bukit Tinggi.
And you told me about your sighting there, because you've got to sort of wait around for an hour or two sometimes for these birds, and there's nothing else to do. And when they turn up, they're just right in front of you, and you take photos. So I think you just sort of took a quick break. I think you heard one calling, and you sort of sneaked down into the forest behind and managed to see this bird while the others were waiting for these targets up at the top. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try this too. And I kind of sneaked out the back of the hide while everyone's waiting to take their photos, and sneaked down there. But again, no luck. So yeah, this is very much a bird that's one of my top priorities to see in the world.
Yeah, check out. We'll post a link as part of the episode notes, and you can check out the few photos I've taken of Rail-babbler. Charlie will contemplate those as he's locked down, dreaming of seeing the Rail-babbler. Oh, sorry. I just have to take a little revenge, because I think I've only seen 2 or 3 out of your top 10. You've seen 7 or 8 of mine, maybe more.
But that's a big one. Anyway, it's great to hear about your adventures with that.
Hey, I'll tell you one more part of this story of this incredible day I had in the forest. I didn't see any other tourists that day, but at some point I was birding off the trail, and a whole group of people came by, and these were the Orang Asli people, who are the indigenous people of the Malayan Peninsula. And it was just one of the most amazing sort of anthropological or cultural experiences I've ever had, because these people, they didn't see me, they didn't know I was there, they weren't performing anything for me, it wasn't in any sense staged. This was just people living in the forest in their natural environment, and they just looked so at home in the forest. I just remember men sort of wearing loincloths and carrying babies on their shoulders. And
so were you kind of hiding from them, or what?
I wasn't hiding, no. I just happened to be off the trail, looking for black-capped babbler or something, and then these people just walked down the trail. So I wasn't hiding from them, and they were completely unaware that I was there. It was amazing.
This is what they didn't hear you. They might have shot an arrow into the into the bushes.
This very skinny bearded pig.
So I did some research in Peninsular Malaysia many years ago, and I was doing mist netting in this one wildlife reserve, and I had this group of Orang Asli coming by, and I was just sort of sat next to my net, like on a log, processing this bird, measuring its wings and putting a little band on it, and they were like, oh, and they were trying to get me to give them the bird so they could eat it.
Really?
And I in sort of like. And I think I had a few birds like in bags, and they were like, no, and of course they didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't speak a word of their language, and they were sort of motioning, that they wanted to eat these, and I was like trying to motion that I was putting bands on their legs and releasing them, and they just found this very bizarre thing to do, but in the end they just sort of shook their heads and walked off into the forest.
I can imagine.
Yeah,
it amazes me that those Orang Asli people are still there. Peninsular Malaysia is just very densely populated and quite developed. It's amazing that they're still there and living this authentic hunter-gatherer lifestyle, at least some of them. I know some have sort of adapted to modern life, and I'm sure some of them probably live in the big city these days. But yeah, that was an amazing thing to see those folks. And I guess I felt some kind of affinity in that I'd just been sort of madly hunting these birds, and of course I was just doing it to see them, and they do it for sustenance, but felt some kind of connection.
Yeah, it's an amazing place, and it's rather sad as well. I mean, people may have heard of the conservation issues in the region. They plant a lot of oil palms, and they chop an awful lot of rainforest down. And I actually went the first time probably 20 years ago into Taman Negara. And all the way down the river, it was all, you just see forest all the way down. And then I went the last time probably